Hello and welcome to this edition of the News Hour. Today at the Gun Owners News Hour, we want to take a look at some kind of interesting things that have been going on in the upper part of Idaho. A newly elected state representative, Heather Scott, who before she got into politics, we were talking about this just before we came on, was living a productive life as a biologist, and her resume reflects all kinds of activities in that regard. But as both of us had found out a long time ago, I was in the state legislature in Virginia. Heather is in the legislature right now in Idaho, has a way of consuming a good deal of your time, if not all of your available time, and then some. The reason I came to find out about you, Heather, was your activity in defense of a veteran who was about to get hammered by the loss of his Second Amendment rights for a rather spurious reason. But it's not only important because you helped stand in the way, literally, but it also illustrates a general drive on many fronts by the federal government particularly to go after people's Second Amendment rights. We saw it coming earlier under the Bush administration when they went after veterans because of various psychiatric diagnoses that without any trial, without any due process, were being used to trigger a removal of their guns if they had guns, a denial of a concealed carry permit if they had been applying for one. And since then, it's been kind of open season using psychiatric analyses, diagnoses, to go after veterans. Now they've been trying the same thing against people who are involved in trying to get their Social Security benefits. By the way, since the Veterans Administration hasn't gone quite this rogue, we might mention that Social Security was actually offering retirees that, well, if you'll sign away your right to keep and bear arms, we'll let you continue getting your Social Security benefits. Dang, that was nice of them. Well, Heather, you've encountered that same kind of attitude there in Boundary County, Idaho. This poor guy was about ready to have his guns removed, and apparently the local folks didn't take well to that, and all I could do is say, hooray for Idaho.
Well, we like our guns up here in Idaho.
Great.
We don't like to be messed with. So, Mr. Arnold, he had a stroke about a year ago, and upon release from the hospital, the doctor just gave him a diagnosis of a stroke, and they filled out some paperwork and checked a box on there that said he couldn't deal with his finances. And when they did that, it set off the Brady handgun bill. His name was turned over to the FBI for the National Instant Criminal Background System check, and at that point, his rights were taken away.
Now, let me jump in.
With no chance to appeal.
There's a lot of people, including, say, those in college and all along life's course, who, not everybody, but there are those individuals who maybe just careless, maybe just don't do numbers. I don't know, but they can't balance a checkbook very well, and they're not unused to having checks bounce back on them. That probably means they're sloppy and careless with financial matters. But I don't see how you can make the jump that says that this person is too dangerous to have a gun.
I hear you.
And that's really what they were saying to this veteran.
Well, it was a total overreach, and it was done by bureaucrats. And he received a letter July 30th saying that they've deemed him incompetent from this diagnosis over 7 months earlier. He didn't have a chance to appeal, and They sent him a pretty scary letter.
And that lack of appeal right there, that just starts flashing a neon light. Due process alert. And the federal government just doesn't really seem to be hung up on due process.
No, I don't think they are. I don't think they read the Constitution.
Well, that's another thing. I believe that's part and parcel of the Potomac fever that used to be a phrase more in vogue perhaps than it is now. But that's what it amounts to, is that I'm here in Washington and I'm above the law. I make the law for the little people. That's kind of the way it sounds out in the hustings. Apparently, they're not aware that they used to be viewed as public servants, and I think we need to return to that time when we can say, hey, boy, fetch it. You're my servant.
Well, and the citizens need to recognize that all power is inherent in the people. And if we keep treating these people like kings and queens, of course, they're going to keep acting like it. Citizens are the boss of our elected officials.
I like the way you put that.
Us.
If we keep treating them as kings and queens, not too surprisingly, they're going to act like it. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was running, I had run twice, and the second time I got elected. On the eve of that successful election, I hadn't been elected, and it's just a little lowly legislative House of Delegates, we call it here in Virginia, seat. And so there weren't any polls ballyhooing the fact that Pratt was rising fast and might take out an incumbent. It's just that people could apparently sense that maybe I was going to make it. And I kid you not, it was almost as if people began to bow and scrape. Not down to the floor, it wasn't quite that extreme. But I was being treated with more deference than I was used to, or that I really, on reflection, thought I deserved. And I thought, man, no wonder people can lose it when they get elected. You could get kind of used to this.
Well, they want to keep that image up that you're very powerful. They want you to keep that image up with your citizens. And so they feed your self-esteem. All of a sudden you're the funniest person in the room, the prettiest person in the room, and everyone wants to take you to lunch.
Yeah.
And you're just a regular citizen.
To lunch and to dinner, at least in Richmond.
You're right there.
And if you're not careful, you don't have any time for reflection, for looking into matters, or hopefully you've got a staff that can do some of that. But you've got to do some digging. You've got to be getting yourself ready, especially why do they want this? I remember I had been approached by one of the poobahs in the legislature about, now you're going to vote for this industrial revenue bond, aren't you? And I said, what in the world is an industrial revenue bond? That's how well prepared I was. And it turns out that it's a piece of fascism. It's a government grant of a favorable lower rate of interest to a particular developer, in this case, so that he's going to have such a competitive rate of interest that others in the private sector aren't going to be able to compete successfully with him, and he's going to be able to get the contract to do whatever that bond was all about. And when I realized what it was, I said, I can't vote for that. Because my first question was, if it's such a good idea and the government's not involved in it, why is the legislature passing or not? Why is it considering a measure? And that's when I looked into it and realized, oh, man, Mussolini didn't have anything over us. This is incredible. Private power benefiting from public power.
Well, I think what a lot of people don't realize is probably at least 3/4 of the legislation that goes through is put up by lobbyists, special interest groups, or bureaucrats. And it's not the lawmakers making these great laws. It's organizations, lobby groups, and bureaucrats.
And you mean they don't have the best interest of the general population at heart?
I don't think so.
No, that wasn't my experience either. Well, talking to a freshman representative in Idaho, in the Idaho House of Representatives, Heather Scott, and apparently not too much has changed because her experiences and what she's been finding in her legislature kind of track with what I found many years ago in Virginia. Going to be back and talk some more with Representative Heather Scott. She's been a bit of an enfant terrible. She hit the Idaho legislature, and they're still not liking it. And good for you, Heather.
That's putting it lightly.
Well, I'm sure it is, but there are certain limits on the language that we're able to use on a family show.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at your Facebook page, and you really have a fabulous photograph with I guess we call it a meme. Hey, Sierra Club, you won. And it's a mountain slope, totally denuded. Why don't you explain? I thought the Sierra Club was for nature.
Well, that's what we were talking about in the last segment, special interest groups, and maybe their interests aren't the same as the citizens' interest.
Just maybe?
Yeah, just maybe.
And so in this case, the Sierra Club, what brought all that about? Because apparently it was denuded by a fire, if I get it right.
What happens out west here is a lot of the property is managed by the federal government. And management to them, in a lot of cases, is just hands-off, no management. And then we pay the price by fires that destroy all of our public lands, and the East picks up the tab for the federal government's costs. So that's what that picture represents. It's just kind of the theme out west on managing is no management.
They don't want to interfere with nature, from what I am able to tell. And so, hey, forest fires happen. And indeed, sometimes they do. Sometimes it's produced by lightning in a dry season in a dry forest. That's certainly something that can happen. But even if that's the case, just because it's natural doesn't necessarily mean it's good. The book of Genesis in the Bible opens up by saying that we should have dominion over the earth. And standing around watching a fire denude a mountainside, or several mountainsides perhaps, that's nuts. I can't think of anything more wasteful. Lots of things are going to be impacted because some folks that are more concerned about some snail darter, perhaps, or whatever their fetish might be at the moment, they're going to let these kinds of things happen. These people shouldn't be allowed near a forest.
Well, I think it's a perfect example of government driving the citizens instead of the citizens driving our government. We should be directing our government our wishes. Instead, we're allowing this top-down management. We allow it. We have all the power as citizens, but we're allowing it.
That's a very clear-cut statement, but obviously you could probably make it sound much more complicated, because I'm looking at your resume, and you've been involved in one project after another in the West, dealing with hydroelectric, dealing with fish, dealing with all kinds of land use issues. And it would seem to me that your opponents really aren't that well equipped to take you on.
Here's the beauty. I don't have any political experience. So how do you take on someone that has no political experience?
Of course you do now. But no, I know what you're saying.
When I jump into something, I jump in with both feet. So that's me.
Well, and frankly, I wish there had been somebody like you in the legislature when I was there. I was on a conservation-type committee, and it would have been very helpful to have somebody that knew some of the ins and outs of biology, zoology, and all the kinds of arguments that might be made. When we let these environmentalists loose and let them make policy, nasty things happen. The picture that you have in your Facebook showing what the Sierra Club did by their let it burn type policy. I think it's the fetish with the snail darter that has contributed rather mightily to the water shortage in California. They let perfectly good fresh water from the mountains, from the melts of the winter in the spring, go out to sea. The kind of irrationality and hatred of dominion over nature that these people have, it's so destructive.
Yes, it is.
So you're now in the legislature, and I'll bet you're as popular as that famous skunk at the garden party when these kind of subjects come up.
Well, I kind of speak my mind, and they don't like that, and they're really not used to hearing the truth or being called out on their shenanigans. And I'm pretty good at that.
Excellent. Well, that's been needed. That has been so overdue. And I hope that you can set a trend that will spread from Idaho, because it's not obviously just Idaho. It's every state in the country has a problem with environmentalists who would prefer snail darters to people being able to have potable water to drink. And that's kind of what it reduces to. And these people are dangerous. They really are dangerous. Now, let's circle back to the Veterans Administration. This guy was not able to, he was being threatened with his right to keep and bear arms because of a diagnosis, which hadn't been a court order. He hadn't been to court, hadn't had an attorney, hadn't had expert witnesses on his side to rebut the expert witnesses on the government side. They just made an administrative finding, right, at the Veterans Administration. No trial at all.
That's the problem. There was no board of directors that looked at this. It was just a doctor's diagnosis and a little check mark on a form that was filled out at the hospital when he was released. And then 7 months later, he receives a letter in the mail saying, you're incompetent, you're under the Brady handgun bill, and we're going to send a field examiner out to your home. And I found this out on the evening of August 5th, and that next morning when they were supposed to show up, we sent a little note out, we contacted the sheriff, and we showed up to support him in this endeavor.
Now, the we ultimately was a lot of people, wasn't it?
Over 100 citizens. I think I released the note at about 7 in the morning, and by 9 o'clock we had over 100 citizens there, a couple representatives, Bonner County Sheriff, and a city police officer.
That is
or police chief, I think it was.
That's amazing. That is so impressive that within 2+ hours, that many people from the community get the message, drop what they're doing, which could have been breakfast, could have been the first hour or two at work, and there they are in defense of Mr. Arnold, the threatened veteran. Really a great place in the country to live. We're going to be back and talk some more with Representative Heather Scott about fun and politics in Idaho. Before we go any farther, Heather, please give out your web address so people can find you and get a little bit more information about what we've been talking about.
Well, I'm on Facebook at Heather Scott for North Idaho, and then I also have a Vote Heather Scott web page, and I also have a Rep Heather Scott website. So I have a couple different ones out there.
The voteheatherscott.com is where somebody could also send a donation, right?
That is true. Or Facebook.
Well, if they can do it off Facebook, I wasn't aware of that. Very good. Okay, Heather Scott for Northern Idaho or voteheatherscott.com. Either one will get you to where we are. The Facebook page, I know, has this very amazing picture of the denuded mountainside, and you're giving credit to the Sierra Club for their great work there and advancing the cause of nature. Are you trying to make me a target? Heather, I don't think you need any help.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
You've done a magnificent job in putting your finger in the eye of these folks. Obviously, they're going to be coming for you, and that's why I think people around the country don't have to live in Idaho. Folks, this is a race that you need to be helping, whether it's $5 or $500. Send Heather Scott what you can, because the crazies are going to be coming after her. They are in love with their denuded mountainside, and for her to show them for what they are and to have the picture of that burned out mountainside is something they can't brook. And so, yeah, they're going to be coming for Heather Scott, and the least we can do is be coming to help Heather Scott when that battle is joined, because I imagine they've already had meetings about what are we going to do about that woman.
Oh, so Larry, just so you're aware, last year, or the last time I ran, which was 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, in the last 3 weeks of my run, they put $58,000 in PAC money against me. And this is someone with no political experience, brand new. It was nuts.
Well, frankly, I would take that as a badge of honor, and happily their failure is even more delicious, because I'm sure they could have put more money in if they'd have thought it might have made the difference. They're pretty good at measuring opinion and doing these kinds of things, and the fact that they failed, I think it's just sweet. And the fact that you have been standing up the way you have, I think it's going to be very difficult for them, frankly, to take you out. Well,
they've started early, because last week I made the front page of a big newspaper trying to tie me to the Aryan nations and,
the only thing you have in common with the Aryan nations is that a lot of them are as bald as that mountainside the Sierra Club burned down.
I love it. Thank you. So yeah, they're already starting on me.
In a way, it's good for you. I realize it's never fun. I didn't appreciate it when the teachers union was coming after me because they had lots of money and professionals, and they were very good at what they did. But I think for one thing, you're not in a changing district, unless I'm mistaken. And that was one thing that helped them get rid of me, was the rug was being pulled out from under me by redistricting, whereas there's not too many ways they can redistrict you in that northern, is it called the Panhandle of Idaho?
Yes, it is.
So that's where you are, and hopefully they're just going to be kind of hard-pressed. And what my hope would be is that the more they want to make an issue of this, the more you can expose them for the really anti-nature people they are, certainly the anti-people group that they are. They really don't care about people. They really would rather a forest burn down, maybe people die, incomes are lost, loggers that might have been able to log that mountain at some time in the near future will now have to travel much farther to go to work every day. Mm-hmm. Thank an environmentalist for all those inconveniences. That's what they do.
I think they underestimate the power of the people. And I think they underestimate, I do not think they believe the people are smart. And the citizens, as they wake up, as more and more happens and they wake up, they're very educated, especially in my district. They know exactly what's going on.
Well, and apparently they've got some commitment to old-fashioned values of individual responsibility and accountability. And that's not where the Sierra Club is coming from, frankly. So they're kind of at war with I've been to Idaho a few times, and it strikes me that the ethos of the area that you're located in is one that is pretty much the frontiersman that made this country, fashioned it from a wilderness where hardly anything was being produced to a land where all kinds of things are being produced and made us the most prosperous and powerful nation in the world. Oh, how they hate that.
It's a big timber area. Yes, it is.
Well, I have a little land with a little timber, and I kind of appreciate what timber can do. So the fact that they want to just see it burn down, and I'm not, I was thinking about this as I was thinking about you and your situation. I don't have any insurance on my land for any of those trees that I would want to sell for logging. I'm going to have to talk to my insurance agent and find out if it is available and how much it costs, because that's a real asset, and it could go up overnight by accident or on purpose.
Yes, sir.
Not that anybody would ever torch a forest, of course.
Right.
So you got involved with Mr. Arnold, and amazingly, people were there over 100 in almost the bat of an eye. I had no idea it was that short a notice that most of the folks had. Well, you didn't have much more.
We just found out the night before that the field examiner was scheduled to come to his home, and so we just did a release and let the public know.
Now, do you put this out on your email list as well as whatever radio stations might pick this kind of thing up?
I don't deal with the regular media because they're not my friend. So I just use unconventional methods. We'll leave it at that.
Well, phone trees have been known to do a good job, and I'm sure there were some email or texts. All of those are some of the new media that I know we use. And I agree with you. If we were waiting to have the media pick up a GOA news release about the bad voting record of some politician that's pretending to be a pro-Second Amendment sort of politician, we'd be able to take long vacations.
So you'll be waiting a long time.
A long time. So I'm glad you've taken advantage of the new media, as a professor of communications at University of Toledo called it. It indeed is the new media. And you whoop the old media and the Democrat machine and the Sierra Club and all of their allies. I'm just amazed. I mean, like in a couple of hours. But even though that you're able to communicate that quickly, that says volumes about the kind of people that are in your district, that they would be there. I mean,
we have unbelievable people up here, and they understand the importance of gun rights.
But it's not a tiny district, and for that many, over 100 people to show up in such a limited amount of time, man, that's impressive. It's almost as if you've reinvented the militiamen, which was the Paul Revere was trying to awaken, literally, when he made his midnight ride. And here you don't have to have...
Are you just trying to get me in trouble?
Heather, when you stopped them from grabbing that veterans' guns, if you hadn't been on their list before, and I think you were, my dear, you're there now. But we're going to come back and talk some more with Representative Heather Scott of Idaho and talk about the folks that she's been having to deal with and overcome. Encouraging folks, you can do it too. Already having fought some pretty significant battles in defense of property, individual liberty, and so far either winning or coming to a draw. And pretty neat that somebody who's just gotten into politics can have such an enviable record. I remembered during the break the name of this communications professor at the University of Toledo. It's Brian Patrick Leahy, and he wrote a book more or less entitled, and I've interviewed him some time ago on this show, a book entitled The New Media and the Rise of the Concealed Carry Movement, or something like that. And he showed how, in spite of the either antipathy or the ignoring of concealed carry efforts, state by state by state, progress has been made primarily through the new media. People doing what you did to get out that 100-plus people to defend the veteran who was being threatened by the Veterans Administration. And I think it's just magnificent that apparently nobody had to send us all instructions on how to do it. You're doing it. Other people are doing it. And it's driving the establishment nuts because they can't control it.
Yep, you got it.
They can't control it. So the issue seems to have come to a stalemate, I presume. Is that a correct description of where the veterans' gun rights are at the moment? He's still got his guns. They haven't grabbed them, but are they lurking?
He is still on a list. And he's still on this list. He cannot go purchase a gun at this point. He has to go through a huge process to get his name off that list and to deem him competent.
So, in other words, I want to hammer on this. He has to prove he is innocent.
Yes, he does.
Which is exactly standing on its head the basic principles of American jurisprudence. That is wrong. But it's being done, and of course, it's not just Mr. Arnold. It's done all the time. That's what administrative, quote-unquote, law procedures are involving all the time. And the citizen has to come before them and prove that the accuser, often the federal government itself, is wrong, and that the citizen is not guilty. That's not the function of the citizen. That's the role of the government to prove that we're guilty in a proceeding. And so you've taken on a really basic problem in 21st century America.
Right, and unfortunately we have to go through the system that's in place to fix it. The amazing thing is a couple days after the incident and the national attention it drew, a letter arrived to Mr. Arnold coming from his doctor who hadn't seen him or done an exam or anything, that stated he had made a dramatic improvement both physically and mentally and is now competent to handle his financial matters and should be allowed to do so.
Let me see if I got this right. The same doctor that, am I correct, had not seen him before the stroke, now after the stroke, still hasn't seen him, but what, based on maybe somebody calling from Washington saying, man, you got to diffuse this situation.
Make it go away. Make it go away. Yep.
And if they can't make Heather Scott go away, they can at least kind of, like a dog, try to cover over their what they were doing, and at least that gives them a temporary cover. But it's going to stink after a while, and this stinks. What they've been doing, not just to Mr. Arnold, but to so many people, this is business as usual. Due process, patooey.
And there's no one to blame but ourselves for allowing it. I mean, how many people are actively engaged in their government? It's easy to complain, but it's a lot harder to show up at a meeting, to go to a county commissioner meeting and sit and listen what's going on and to be engaged. And so, we can't put all the blame on them. Most of it is us.
Well, I hope that you're the celebrity, because I presume the media, the standard media, can't completely ignore you, will enable you to perhaps recruit some like-minded people to run for the legislature next year, so that your numbers might increase and there might be kind of a pushback, because you had wanted to run some pro-Second Amendment legislation, and all you got was kind of a big yawn and go away.
Yeah, last year, the only bill I carried my first year was constitutional carry. And
meaning no permits to carry a concealed firearm.
Right. And so I worked with the local Idaho Second Amendment Alliance and two national, including you guys, national gun organizations supported me. One did not. And we fought hard, but we had a committee chairman that just sat on the bill and would not allow it to be heard in committee.
It makes such a difference when the pro-Second Amendment movement speaks with one voice. And you're describing a situation where that did not happen. And generally, the enemy's pretty good at seeing weakness. And when they saw that you didn't have a united front behind you, get lost, sister. It's kind of we're not going to hear your bill. So hopefully the voters aren't going to hear of that committee chairman again. I would really like to think that we might find somebody, a good opponent, raise a little bit of money, articulate, and come after this person, showing how completely opposite the Republican platform and the notion, no doubt what he told voters directly or indirectly, that, man, I'm here and I'm down there in Boise and I'm working for your freedom, and it's a terrible fight, but man, you just got to really be happy that I'm there, because that's me. I'm all in.
Unfortunately, you don't make a chairmanship role unless you listen to orders from the top down. That's my experience, what I've noticed and observed, and so that's unfortunate.
So the Sierra Club informing bureaucrats in Boise are likely to have a lot more influence than you or some schlub citizen coming to testify before a committee.
Yeah, and I don't want to single out the Sierra Club, because there's a lot more than just them out there that are working.
And that's right. I accept that. It's easy. I'm being intellectually lazy. You're right. There's lots of them.
And there's a lot of them that have moved into Idaho and that are actively working against land issues.
Yeah, we finished screwing up California. Let's see what we can do to Idaho.
Yep.
And they are very busy. You must admit, these are not lazy people.
You're absolutely right.
Well, I hope that you're already engaged in campaign 2016, that you're getting invitations, you're speaking, you're on radio in the district, talk radio at least, and you obviously know how to use the new media. I think that is super. I'm going to tell Professor Patrick Leahy about what you've done, because that's exactly the kind of thing he was bragging on, as to how the concealed carry movement moved from maybe half the states to now all the states, at least in name, have some kind of concealed carry system. And it was by using the new media, by being able to text, That's even better than email, obviously, for those that aren't completely used to this, because the text rings your phone right away. The email usually doesn't. And so you may not see your email for a day or two, but the text that comes in and goes bong, you're going to see that. And somebody saying, hey, got a hearing in Boise, got to be there by 9:15. Well, apparently some of them were able to drive pretty fast and they got there.
Well, and we have to remember, it doesn't take everyone. It just takes committed few people that are willing to stand, and it's amazing how much you can get done.
Well, I find it so because you've held the federal government off. They were probably figuring on having a really fun bust with the equivalent of Clive and Bundy's BLM agents with machine guns trained on this poor veteran. Even the Department of Education has a SWAT team, so I'm sure the Veterans Administration does too. I don't know that as a fact. I'm just saying that I'd probably bet $5 that they do, because I think they all seem to have. You're not a self-respecting bureaucracy in D.C. if you don't have at least one SWAT team. And so you saved the man quite a bit, but I think the other citizens of your district have been spared something too, because Heather Scott, you have backed off the federal government for now. The fight's not over. We're going to have to stay vigilant. But I am so happy that you're in the fight, and we look forward to working with you down the road. Thanks so much for what you're doing.
Thanks for having me on your show.
The Bill of Rights protects every American's God-given right to keep and bear arms. Now that right is being seriously undermined as legally registered rifles are being confiscated in some parts of our country. If we're not careful, we may find ourselves with no right to own guns. And that's where Gun Owners of America comes in. Gun Owners of America is in Washington every day fighting for you to keep that right. Congressman Ron Paul has called GOA the only no-compromise gun lobby in Washington. You need to be part of this great grassroots group of activists who are keeping the heat on their members of Congress. Find out right now how you can join. Call 888-886-GUNS and get started receiving their fact-filled newsletters and action alerts. Call 888-886-GUNS or go to their webpage at gunowners.org and help make your voice heard in Washington. Make that call right now and call Gun Owners of America at 888-886-GUNS. Remember, it's not just about gun control, it's about control.